This is Management 500, Organizational Behavior at DePaul University's Kilstead Graduate School of Business. This video will cover 3 key takeaways from Chapter 11 through 13 of the textbook that we felt were most important to share with the class. We will provide highlights of each lesson, as well as reasons why these are important for the class to understand. Our first key takeaway comes from Chapter 11 and states, managers should be appropriately paired with tasks, situations, and/or groups based on leadership style. Leadership is defined as the ability to influence a group towards the achievement of a vision or a set of goals. There are 2 types. Trait theory leadership, which is based on personality traits such as extroversion. The second is behavior theory leadership, which states that leadership can be trained or taught. But how do you go about matching managers appropriately? One method is to use the Fiedler contingency model. The first step in this model is to identify the employee leadership style. Most leaders either have a relationship-oriented or a task-oriented leadership style. Fiedler created the least preferred coworker, or the LPC questionnaire, to identify leadership styles. The next step is to define the situation. There are 3 situational dimensions to consider. First, labor-member relations, which is the trust and respect employees have from their leaders. Second, task structure, which is the degree to which the leader's job assignments are structured or unstructured. And finally, position power, which is the degree of influence a leader has over things like hiring, firing, discipline, promotions, and salary increases. Within this step, you want to evaluate the situation in terms of these 3 variables. For example, the better the leader, membership relations, the more highly structured the job, and the stronger the position power, the more control the leader has. The final step is to match leaders and situations. Combining the 3 contingency dimensions yields 8 possible situations in which leaders can find themselves in. This chart shows how matching an individual's LPC questionnaire score and 8 situations can be achieved to attain the greatest leadership effectiveness. Fiedler concluded that task-oriented leaders perform better in situations very favorable to them and very unfavorable. So when faced with a category 1, 2, 3, 7, or 8 situation, task-oriented leaders perform better. In order to apply these findings, you would match leaders in terms of their LPC scores with the type of situation. In terms of the leader, membership relationships, task structure, and position power for which they're best suited. But since Fiedler's view basically looks at the individual leadership style as fixed, there are only 2 ways to improve leadership effectiveness. First, you can either change the leader to fit the situation, or you can change the situation to fit the leader. So, why is this important to the Management 500 class? As managers, we need to know how to identify the best leaders for the group in order to help improve the overall group effectiveness, efficiency, and performance. As managers, we may need to fill key positions with effective leaders. Tests and interviews like the LPC questionnaire can help to identify people with the leadership qualities appropriate for certain roles. Our second key takeaway comes from Chapter 12 and states, office politics is driven more by an organization as a whole and not necessarily by a group of individuals. The book states, in Power and Politics, power does not require goal compatibility. merely dependence. Leadership, on the other hand, requires some congruence between the goals of the leaders and those being led. Although individuals can certainly play a role in fostering politicking, evidence more strongly supports the idea that certain situations and cultures promote politics. Recent research and observation have identified a number of key factors that appear in encouraging political behavior. The text identifies 5 organizational factors that encourage highly political cultures. First is trust. The less trust within an organization, the higher level of political behavior, and the more likely it will be of an illegitimate kind. Second is the role of ambiguity. Role ambiguity means that the desired employee behaviors are not clear. There are therefore fewer limits to the scope and the functions of the employee's political actions. The greater the role of ambiguity, the more he or she can engage in unnoticed political activity. Third is an unclear performance evaluation. The more organizations use subjective criteria in appraisal, emphasis or to the ability to emphasize a single outcome measure, or allow significant time to pass between the time of the action and its appraisal, the greater the likelihood that the employee will get away with politicking. Fourth is a high emphasis on zero-sum approach to reward allocations. The zero-sum approach treats the reward, or the pie, as fixed. So any gain one person or group achieves has to come at the expense of another person or group. The more an organization's culture emphasizes the zero-sum or win-lose approach to reward allocations, the more employees will be motivated to engage in politics. The final factor is management. When employees see the people on the top engaging in political behavior, especially when they do so successfully and get rewarded for it, a climate is created that supports politics. Politics by top management, or politicking by top management, in a sense, gives permission to those lower in the organization to play politics by implying that such behavior is acceptable. There has been extensive research on the relationships between organizational politics and individual outcomes. Very strong evidence shows that the perception of organizational politics are negatively related to job satisfaction, job anxiety, and stress. Performance, including turnover. So, the book recommends that managers should avoid engaging in actions that could be perceived as organizational politics, i.e. self-serving or manipulative actions, in order to gain trust from employees. Managers should be more transparent in their decision making and communicate the reasons why decisions are made in order to minimize misperceptions that are playing. So, why is this important to class? To be an effective manager, we need to understand which actions could be perceived as organizational politics and avoid them in order to gain the trust from employees. To drive productivity, we must also understand that the undesirable employee behaviors which could result from the perceptions of political behavior. Our third and final key takeaway comes from Chapter 13 and states, diverse opinions and low-level conflicts can enhance rather than hinder the overall work product and performance of a group. So, before we continue, let's understand what conflict is. Conflict is a process that begins when one party perceives another party has or is about to negatively affect something the first party cares about. It is important to understand the difference between functional and dysfunctional conflict. First, we need to look at the different types of conflict: task, relationship, and process. Task conflict relates to the content and the goals of work. Relationship conflict focuses on the interpersonal relationships. And process conflict relates to how the work gets done. Low levels of task conflict can stimulate discussion of ideas and increase creativity and innovation. Studies demonstrate that relationship conflicts are almost always dysfunctional because friction and interpersonal hostilities inherent in the relationship conflicts increase personality clashes and decrease mutual understanding, which does hinder the completion of organizational tasks. High levels of process conflict can stimulate uncertainty about job task roles and increase time to complete tasks. For this type of conflict to be productive, it must be kept low. When task and process conflict are productive, they improve the quality of decisions, stimulate creativity and innovation, encourage interest and curiosity among group members, thus providing the medium through which problems can be aired and tensions can be resolved. So let's take a look at the conflict resolution guide. I have to say, unfortunately, there's no one-size-fits-all solution to resolving conflict. There are a number of different conflict resolution techniques appropriate for a variety of situations. So, as our guide shows, there's 5. Competition, collaboration, avoidance, accommodation, and compromise. Let's start with competition. Competition works best when a quick, decisive action is vital on important issues or when an unpopular action needs to be implemented. You can use collaboration in a situation where both sets of concerns are too important to be compromised, or when you want to merge insights from people with different perspectives. Use avoidance when an issue is trivial or symptomatic of other issues, or when more important issues are pressing. Accommodation is ideal when you find out that you're wrong, or when issues are more important to others than to yourself. Finally, compromise should be used in order to achieve temporary settlements to complex issues, or when goals are important but not worth the effort of potential disruption of more assertive approaches. So, let's conclude. Why is this important to class? In our class specifically, we are learning how managers effectively use organizational behaviors. So this must mean that managers must understand which types of conflict to avoid and which can increase productivity if we wish to drive maximum performance of groups we manage. Managers can avoid major disruptions of group work by understanding the different methods of conflict resolution appropriate for different situations. Well, we've come to the end of our presentation, and we want to thank you for taking the time.